It's Sunday afternoon, the 29th of August, 2021, and I'm standing here at Big Cataloochee Creek in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I am just above what we call the Upper Iron Bridge. As you can see it through the trees there, an iron bridge that was constructed by the Civilian Conservation Corps back in the mid to late 1930s. I'm also at the location that's right at the mouth of Winding Stair Branch, where that tributary flows into Big Cataloochee Creek, and I'm also across from the main road. I'm on the spot, or very near it, where the first store in Cataloochee stood, operated by a man by the name of Charles Jarrett, beginning in the 1880s. There was also a grist mill here. Now, the stones for the grist mill had been hewed or carved out by Elijah Messer. Elijah Messer was the father of Will Messer, who was very prominent in Little Cataloochee. He was instrumental in a lot of things that happened there. But anyway, those stones hewed out by Elijah Messer, originally placed in a grist mill at the Lucky Buttonhole. That was placed there by a man by the name of John Smith, so I was told. Now, that wasn't a good place for a mill, and it got washed out. And so those stones were brought down here, and grist mill was constructed, and Vic Smith, John Smith's son, helped place them here. By the way, Vic Smith also built the little stone spring house that's down there where the group campground is now at the Uncle Will Hall place, the Preacher Will Hall place, that was owned by my great-great-grandfather originally, John Wesley Hall, after he had acquired it from others. But this was the location of the first store in Cataloochee, operated by Charles Jarrett. It later on was acquired by a man by the name of Frank Palmer. Frank Palmer also sold liquor. And if there are any descendants of his who listen to this, I'm sorry, as again, I'm just telling you what I was told. Frank Palmer's first wife, I believe, passed away, and he married Lou Caldwell. They called her Aunt Lou, and everybody loved her. And they had a son born to them in that marriage in 1903, Theodore Roosevelt Palmer. They named him after the famous Republican president who was then president in 1903. Little Roosevelt Palmer had difficulties. He was what they called crippled. He had some physical deformities, and yet Aunt Lou loved him. She took care of that little fella the best you ever saw and nurtured him, and he sure was blessed to have her as a mother, even though his father was could be a character. In fact, downright mean. It is said that he got it in his head that Creek George Palmer, a relative of his, back up at Davidson Gap, had informed on him, and he and some others went up there and burned Creek George's barn to the ground. He also got in a fight with a man by the name of Milas, and it's said that he cut his ears off with a pocket knife. Not everybody was nice, just like now. Well, Frank Palmer died about 1925. And so Aunt Lou was trying to get by as best she could, and she was selling liquor and got caught. And they sent her to the penitentiary. But Aunt Lou said it was the best thing that ever happened to her. She got the best education there, she said, as she learned how to sew and knit and some other skills. And so she didn't serve a long sentence, came back to Cataloochee, and was able to make an honest living and did well for herself, except that she ended up marrying the infamous Tom King. The same Tom King that busted up the revival meeting at Palmer Chapel Methodist Church long about 1928. It was long about then that they got married. He was a good bit younger than Aunt Lou, and she was still taking care of young Roosevelt. Tom had been born in Maryland, near Baltimore, as I recall, and he wound up here in Cataloochee because he was working for a logging company. Well, Aunt Lou didn't have to put up with him too long. Long about 1930 or thereabouts, he turned up missing. I guess he just went off one day and didn't come home, and nobody could figure out what happened to him. Until some dogs dug up some human remains up near the church. And upon examination, along with a few rags of clothing that were accompanying those skeletal remains, it was determined that they were Tom King's. And so they held a service and buried what was left of him. And that was that. So they thought. Then about 1933, the solicitor over in Waynesville, John Queen, got a letter from somebody alleging that Tom King had been murdered. The letter said not only had he been murdered, but he named the perpetrators. said that it was Burl Caldwell and Arlo Palmer and a mob, and that they killed him near the Nellie post office, buried his remains in a cornfield, and then dug him up and removed him to the woods where the dogs had exhumed them and people discovered them. And the whole story was laid out just as pretty as you please. So Solicitor Queen was contemplating what to do with this letter. Well, in the meantime, and all I know to tell you is what was told me, Tom King showed back up. Not a thing wrong with him. Now the mystery is, not only where did he go, but whose remains were those that they discovered in the woods and buried? Nobody has ever been able to figure that one out. Well, in the meantime, Aunt Lou had gotten free of Tom King because of his abandonment. Now, he lived on to about 1956. He died over in Canton. But Aunt Lou, she made some money, able to sell the land she had here when the Park Service took things over, and she moved out to Maggie Valley, bought a nice piece of real estate there, and she did well in her later years, dying about 1968. Oh, and Roosevelt Palmer, the boy, he lived to be over 25 years old. And as the story goes, he died in 1929. I think it was in June. And because of the physical challenges he had in life, they had trouble laying him out in the casket to look anything like a comfortable manner. But they finally did, and they got him laid out in the coffin. They had him here in the house, again, just over here. And it was warm that night. People were sitting up with the dead. They were visiting with each other all through the night. Somewhere in the middle of the night, with all of that warm weather, Roosevelt's body sat straight up in the coffin, and it cleared the house. Roosevelt got the last laugh. May God bless you.